When it comes to getting achievements in PlayStation games, at least, I very rarely try to actually get the Platinum Trophy. I'm not too bothered by it, and there's only been one game so far where I actually have, which is my favourite game ever, Fallout 4. And I was quite happy to just have the Platinum in that one, and since Gran Turismo 7 had a couple of bugged ones, like the rain license not working, I figured, well, what's the point in going for it anyway? But of course with Spec 2, that was fixed. I finally got around to buying a couple of the expensive high rollers cars, so I realised that I only had one thing left to do, which was just to do 50 sport mode events. Now I'd only done one, because one event popped up on Special Stage Route X. I thought, you know what, that kind of reminds me of the Gran Turismo 6 days, so I'll jump into that. It was my first race, first podium, and what do you know, first victory as well. And you're going to probably see some of that footage here in the video, but I had an idea for a series. See, since the only one left to do is to just finish, not even to win, but just to complete 50 sport mode events, and then I'll have the Platinum, why not go for it? And since some people do occasionally say, you know, you do tuning on the channel, you do car reviews, you talk about car news and gaming news and Gran Turismo news, but you don't really do that much actual racing. And the main reason for that is, as I've said before, I'm not the quickest of drivers, believe it or not, because I don't think people would be that interested in watching somebody who isn't that quick in comparison to many esport drivers and many other channels who do mostly do racing, within Forza or Gran Turismo, so why would you watch mine? But since some people do occasionally ask, we can do this as an experimental series if it's something that you're interested in, and for those who maybe are procrastinators, perhaps this is one of the achievements that you also need to do, and you could even run it along with me. Now, I need to do 50. As of this particular video, which is the pilot, or episode 1 if you will, I've done 4 events, including that first one, which as I said was on Route X. It was a pretty great start. One race, one podium, one victory using a Bugatti Chiron. But it ended up being a pretty cool race, and the simple rundown of it is that a couple of us in Bugattis ended up helping each other out. The other dude had an unfortunate mishap on the last corner, and because of having so much time invested in Route X racing, I basically knew the simple but effective strategy of having the best chance to win, which is to save your NOS for the last corner, and also of course to keep as low as possible, because then if somebody is going to try and overtake you, they not only need to try and slipstream you, but they also have to take a much wider corner in order to do that. So if you are going to win, that gives you a pretty damn good chance of doing it. So that first race went really well, and at the time I wasn't planning to do the Platinum Trophy, so I was just going to leave it at that. You know, 100% victory ratio, one race, one win. I would have essentially had the same victory percentage ratio as the Brabham BT46B fan car, the Formula 1 fan car that Niki Lauda drove, only raced once and it won, so it had a perfect ratio. I was planning to keep it that way until, as I said, they made those changes with GT Spec 2. So in the past week I decided to jump back in and do a few others, and of course we usually have 3 at any given time, 3 different events, one which is a bit longer, about maybe 25 minutes, one that's more like 10-15, and one that's maybe 10 tops. This time around I went for the middle one first, then the third, and then the first one. So for the first one, it was at Suzuka. It's a Group 3 category race, and I chose, since it was Group 3 vehicles, to use the Genesis. There was no particular reason why I picked it. My first choice was probably going to be the Porsche 911 because it's just a pretty solid all-rounder, but I thought, you know what, of course, as I said earlier on, I love Fallout. I've already got the Fallout livery on the Genesis, and at the end of the day, I'm not even close to attempting to get every victory. And one of the things which I was curious about to compare this particular series to one which I did very similarly in GT Sport, I did a video series, a very short one, back in the GTS days, wherein I was increasing my sportsmanship and, you know, overall ratings, and I'm pretty sure in that relatively short series, I think I won every event, or something like that, or at least every event turned out pretty good. This time around, it was radically different, and I think that's probably for a couple of reasons. The way that GT Sport seems to work in terms of pairing people does seem different to in GT Sport. It seems, for one thing, slightly less evenly matched, as far as I can remember GT Sport being in comparison. I know I'm not the only person who said that, I've seen a couple of others mention it too, and also, it seems like the kind of people that I was getting matched with, and I don't know if this is maybe indicative of the way I was driving, perhaps, I don't know, but they certainly seem like more amateurish or more crash-happy drivers, and you'll see a couple of occasions of that depending on how I edit the video. A couple of people who are, you know, using you to brake with, or using you to get around a corner, and once or twice I would make a mistake of my own, tapping into someone else, so it can happen, but you can kind of tell the difference more often than not. And one of the things that definitely bugs me is that if you slightly cut a corner, you'll get a penalty that will be a significant amount. Half a second even makes a huge difference when it's on a straight. But when somebody full-on bashes into you, I'm sure it affects their score, but it doesn't really seem to affect the actual race that much. For example, in the race that you'll see in a second at Catalunya, I was just full-on rammed into, and they did nothing in retaliation, even though that's clearly a violation and should have a penalty. Now, the first event, I kind of just gave up on it, to be honest. I entered it, like I said, just picked the Genesis randomly just because I liked the way it looked. I didn't even get the chance to get a qualifying time down, so I started from pretty much the back of the pack. I entered it with the same score and driver rating that I had from the GTS days, which I believe was like a B and S, I think it was ranking. The race kind of devolved a little bit for me. I kind of felt like I couldn't really be bothered with it. It was clear that there was no way I was going to end up anywhere near the front, because it was just too many people to get past working without that qualifying time. Suzuka, as much as I love it, is a very narrow track. It's not always easy to get the overtake. Ultimately, like I said, I kind of gave up on the race. I ended up making one crucial mistake where I spun out, and after that point, you know, I wasn't really climbing the grid anyway, so I just gave up effort. I know that's not the sportsmanlike thing to do, but since it wasn't bothering anyone else and I was at the back of the pack anyway, who really cared? And I'm glad that I didn't quit the event. I did still finish, technically, even though I believe it timed out, but if I had have quit, I don't think it would have necessarily counted, and I could be wrong here, so correct me if I am, but I don't think that would have counted toward my 50 completions. So it's a good job I did finish at least, because it did count toward that. For the next event, this one was a bit longer. It's on a track which I am not a fan of, never have been. I don't really like Catalunya, and again, I just chose a car that I like rather than one which was, I don't think, ever the best choice. I don't really hear anyone saying that this is their go-to vehicle, except for me apparently. The Group 4 Veyron. I really like the audacity of having a Veyron so heavily restricted for this kind of class, and in this one I decided to test more the penalty system and had a bit of fun with the race. It was around a 20-25 minute event. It ended up having, I believe, at least one mandated pit-in. Some people would pit in here, some would pit in there, and even the folks who were by far and away the quickest, I think they were a good 2 seconds quicker at least than my best lap, they were even pitting in as well, and I thought, hang on then, because I was running, as you could see, with no tyre change, and I think I was running on intermediates as well, which burn out even quicker, especially on something like a Veyron. I thought to myself, you know what, even if I get the penalty, I'm going to just do this for the fun of it and just not pit in at all. I'm going to go as far as I can, because the fuel was more than good enough, there was no way it was going to run out, and it was just the tyres. Now, because of doing so much grinding at Le Mans with those exact same tyres on a number of different vehicles, you know, as long as you've got something grippy like the Veyron, like a Skyline, whatever, like a Celica rally car, you know how to use those intermediates. Plenty of us do, because yeah, they wear out, but if you've got a four-wheel drive car especially, you can still work with it. You just get a bit heavier through corners. So I ended up actually, believe it or not, taking the lead. And of course the only reason for that was because everyone else had pitted in at some point, whereas I didn't. The only person in the whole race who didn't pit in. I suddenly had the realization that, oh, maybe I probably should have done that. And then I thought, you know what, I can't be bothered. Because if you think about it, when you're not the fastest on the grid anyway, I'm not really going to lose anything, because I got a 1 minute penalty, which of course took me from ultimately finishing 4th on the grid. And this was the race where actually the quickest person, I believe they were driving a Citroen, smashed into me, like very clearly, deliberately did it, and had no recourse for that, which is such a broken system, especially when they were clearly going to win anyway, so they didn't need to do that. They should have been penalised for it, and it didn't seem that they were. Maybe their rating was, but nothing meaningful. In the race though, I did manage to lead, like I said, and ultimately of course they were going to catch me. The car wasn't as quick, I'm not as quick, and the tyres weren't good. So it was a recipe for failure, but the reason why I decided to just keep going with it is, I thought to myself, A, I'm curious to see how big the penalty is for not pitting in, and secondly, even if it is something like a minute, which it did end up being of course, plus I think a little bit extra for whatever other reason, it was probably about the same amount of time that I would have lost if I had have pitted in anyway. So either way, I would have ended up at the back of the grid. At least this way, I led the race for a little bit and just had a bit of silly fun, you know, just not pitting in at all and having a bit of a crazy time. So that one was a mixed bag. I was disappointed by the personality of some of the other drivers, especially the supposedly best ones on the grid. Those are the people who should know better and should be better, because one of the things that a lot of people don't seem to understand about being a good racing driver, and a popular one, is you don't just need to be the fastest. You actually need to be somebody who people want to like as well. There are plenty of people who are just fast, but they have no personality or no sportsmanship. Clearly you have the skill, but you need to work on the personality side, i.e. having some. Next race was at Fuji, the first of the 3, which was a Lexus LFA event. I decided to jump into it with my Nürburgring edition from the recent Special Projects pack. Balance of Performance was on anyway, and I have to say, I really didn't like how the Balance of Performance felt. And I think it was a combination of having, real people that you're going up against combined with the Balance of Performance and losing my own tuning that I'd done to the car. I really didn't like how the cars performed in the race. And it wasn't just that, the handling felt heavier or that the brakes were less consistent, because you kind of expect that compared to a Group 3 or a Group 2. The thing that I didn't like is the inconsistency between each lap, because even though stuff like tyre wear, fuel wear wasn't really an issue at all, it still seemed fairly inconsistent in terms of, in particular, braking distances. I would brake at roughly the same point at roughly the same places on each lap, and yet the brakes were wildly inconsistent. In this race as well, there was one other, I believe, British driver in, I think it was a yellow LFA. Again, you'll probably see this dingus in action, who was clearly just trying to ram other people. If I recall correctly, I think they tapped into me, so then I tapped into them on the straight, so pretty big difference there. Clearly it was a warning tap with no intention behind it, and then they tried to wipe me out, because of course they're probably 6 years old and need to do a bit of growing up. It was a very mixed bag for my first proper outing in sport mode. This is 4 events completed now toward my goal of 50. Ultimately, over the course of a year, we'll easily, or should easily, be able to do this within 2024, finish my Platinum Trophy, complete all 50 events. I mean, 4 already, and it's the first week of the year. So yeah, I'm looking forward to potentially working through more of this, check out the different events, see what kind of degenerates I'll run into and what kind of people are actually really good drivers in both senses of the word. And if you would like to join me for the journey, and maybe this is something you want to do as well, let me know. Is this a series you would like to see continued on the channel? Either way, I will be doing the races. It's more a question of, do you want to join me here, virtually, for the ride with these highlights? That's it for the pilot episode. Of course, I hope to see you next time, and for now, thanks for watching.